I never thought my life would turn into some twisted guilt trip soap opera, but here we are. I'm Sasha, 25, an elementary school teacher in the Chicago suburbs. It's not a high-paying job, but I love it, and I worked my ass off to get here. College wasn't cheap. I waited tables, took out loans, and did everything I could to make it on my own. Moving back home wasn't part of the dream, but rent was ridiculous, and I needed time to save. My parents, Mark and Linda, weren't thrilled about it, but they let me stay, as long as I contributed. That meant paying rent a reasonable amount, according to Dad, buying my own groceries, and helping out around the house. It wasn't glamorous, but it was temporary. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Then Jessica came back. Jessica is my older sister, 32, and if I had to describe her in one word, it would be untouchable. She's never faced real consequences a day in her life. Growing up, she was the golden child. Always the one getting extra praise, extra attention, extra everything. I don't know if it was because she was the firstborn or because my parents just had a soft spot for her, but she could do no wrong. She dropped out of college. Twice. The first time because she wasn't inspired. The second time because the professors were too demanding. She never held a job for more than a few months, always quitting because her boss was toxic or didn't respect her work-life balance. If she was late on rent, my parents covered it. Car broke down? They paid. Speeding ticket? Mom would sigh and say, cops always target young women. Meanwhile, I was out there scrubbing diner toilets to afford textbooks. For the past couple of years, I thought Jessica had been living on her own. Turns out, she'd been bouncing from one apartment to another, barely holding things together. I didn't know any of this until she showed up one evening, casually announcing that she was pregnant. I'm not here to judge anyone's life choices, but let's just say Jessica was not in a stable situation. The father? Some guy she'd been dating for maybe 3 months. The second she told him, he ghosted, vanished. And Jessica, instead of taking this as a wake-up call, ran straight to my parents. And of course, they immediately went into rescue mode. Within a week, they were converting the basement into a little apartment for her. New flooring, a kitchenette, fresh paint. I didn't ask where the money was coming from, but one night, I overheard Mom on the phone saying they were dipping into savings. I tried to stay out of it. If they wanted to throw money at Jessica, that was their choice. I told myself it wouldn't affect me. The basement was her space. She'd do her thing. I do mine. Simple. That mindset lasted about 2 months. Then the little things started piling up. At first, it was Mom's comments. You should spend more time with Jessica. She's going through so much. Then the guilt trips. She doesn't have anyone else to lean on. It's so hard being pregnant and single. Dad wasn't any better. He found ways to work Jessica into every conversation. You should be grateful for everything you have, Sasha. Not everyone's as lucky as you. Lucky? I was barely scraping by, trying to build a career and save money. Meanwhile, Jessica was getting a fully renovated apartment handed to her, along with endless emotional and financial support. But things hit another level the night I overheard a conversation between Mom and Dad in the living room. She's going to need a lot of help once the baby comes, Mom said. Of course, Dad replied. We'll all pitch in. All? Mom asked. You, me, and Sasha, Dad said, like it was obvious. I nearly dropped the mug I was holding. They hadn't said anything to me about this plan, but it was clear they'd already decided. The uneasy feeling only grew when Jessica started coming over more often. She'd flop onto the couch, groaning about how exhausting pregnancy was, making little comments like, God, Sasha, you don't know how lucky you are. No kids, no stress. I bit my tongue every time, but in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, why does this always fall on me? Then came the dinner. I should have known something was coming. The energy in the house was off. Too casual. Like everyone was in on a secret except me. Jessica was scrolling on her phone. Mom and Dad were making small talk about random things. The neighbors, the weather. Dinner was spaghetti, which was my dad's go-to. We need to have a family talk meal. I don't know why. It's not like spaghetti makes bad news any easier to swallow. Halfway through the meal, Mom cleared her throat. So, we've been thinking. I froze. Nothing good ever followed those words. With Jessica moving back home, she's going to need some help, Mom continued, voice overly sweet. Help with what? I asked, setting my fork down. Dad jumped in before she could answer. The baby, of course. Jessica's got a lot on her plate, and it'll be hard for her to manage everything alone. I glanced at Jessica. She didn't even look up, just kept scrolling. Okay, I said, keeping my voice neutral. But what does that have to do with me? Mom smiled like she was about to say something reasonable. Well, you're already living here, and you're so good with kids, being a teacher and all. So we thought it just made sense for you to help with babysitting. I blinked. Dad nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, just keeping an eye on the baby while Jessica gets back on her feet. It wouldn't be full-time or anything, just when you're home. I stared at them. You want me to come home from teaching all day and then take care of a newborn? Mom sighed, as if I was being difficult. It's not like that, Sasha. We're all going to pitch in. All? I repeated. Yes, Dad said firmly. We're family. Family helps each other. Jessica finally looked up from her phone. She smirked. Wow, Sasha. Didn't realize helping your sister was such a big deal for you. My jaw clenched. It's not about that, I said. I have my own life, my own job. I can't just drop everything to babysit. Mom's smile faded. Jessica's going through a really hard time right now. The least you could do is help her. Why is it my responsibility to fix her choices? I shot back. She's 32 years old. She's not a kid anymore. Jessica rolled her eyes. God, you're so dramatic. Dad's voice turned cold. We expect you to contribute, Sasha. I do contribute, I snapped. I pay rent. I buy my own groceries. I help with chores. How is that not enough? Silence. Jessica just sat there, smug, like she'd already won. Mom finally broke the tension. If you're not willing to help, maybe we need to rethink your living arrangement. My stomach dropped. Are you threatening to kick me out? Mom hesitated. No, of course not. But if you're not willing to contribute more, maybe we need to discuss raising your rent. I stared at them, realization sinking in. They weren't asking. They were cornering me. I didn't say another word. I just pushed my chair back and stood. Mom called my name, but I ignored her. I turned and walked upstairs, slamming my bedroom door behind me. My hands were shaking. I knew my parents played favorites. I knew they had always been over backward for Jessica. But this was next level. They weren't asking me to help. They were making it clear. Either I played along, or they'd make my life hell. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, heart pounding. I had to get out, but I wasn't ready. I had some savings, but not enough to afford a place of my own. Rent in the area was insane, and I didn't have a backup plan. Moving out had always been my goal, but I thought I had time. Time to save, time to plan. Now I had no choice. I grabbed my phone and stared at my texts. A few weeks ago, my coworker Rachel had mentioned she was looking for a roommate. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it felt like a lifeline. Hey, is that roommate thing still an option? She answered almost immediately. Yep. Still looking. Why, you interested? Yeah. Can we talk after work? Of course. I exhaled slowly. This was happening. Now I just had to figure out how to leave without them stopping me. For the next few days, I kept my head down. Mom and Dad were still in passive-aggressive mode, making comments about how some people just don't appreciate family and how it must be nice to have so much free time after work. I didn't engage. Jessica, meanwhile, acted like she had already won. She was everywhere. Her stuff slowly took over the house. Shoes left by the couch. Shopping bags dumped in the hallway. Random baby items piling up in the kitchen. Then she started using my bathroom. That was my breaking point. I got home late one night, exhausted from work, and found her makeup bag sprawled across my sink. Her hairbrush, her face creams, her perfume. My towel was wet. She had used it. I stood there, staring at it, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my fingers ached. She hadn't even asked. She had just taken, like she always did. I walked downstairs, jaw clenched. Jessica was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, one leg draped over the armrest like she owned the place. I cleared my throat. She didn't look up. Jessica. Nothing. I stepped closer. Why are you using my bathroom? She sighed dramatically, like I was so unreasonable. The one downstairs is too small, and I need better lighting for my makeup. I took a deep breath. Use your own space. She finally looked at me, raising an eyebrow. Wow, so territorial. I clenched my fists. It's not about that. It's about respect. Jessica rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling. God, you're so uptight. I turned and walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I started packing. I didn't tell anyone. I knew if my parents found out, they'd try to stop me. So I packed little by little, hiding things in my car, clothes, personal items, important documents. I took photos of everything in my room. My furniture, my laptop, anything Jessica might try to claim was hers after I left. I knew how she operated. Then, when I had everything set, I printed out a letter giving my 30-day notice. I didn't have to. I wasn't a legal tenant, but I wanted it in writing. I slipped the letter under my parents' bedroom door at 6 in the morning. Then I left for work. I knew by the time I got home, all hell would have broken loose. When I got home that evening, the house felt different. The air was thick, charged with tension, like the quiet before a storm. I took a deep breath, bracing myself, and stepped inside. The living room was dark, but I could see the shadowy outline of my dad in his usual chair. His newspaper lay forgotten on the table beside him. Mom sat on the couch, arms crossed tightly over her chest. The TV was on, muted, casting flickering light across their faces. Sasha, Dad said, his voice heavy. We need to talk. I swallowed hard, the anxiety twisting in my gut. About what? He raised the letter, the one I'd slipped under their door that morning. What is this supposed to mean? It's my notice, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm moving out. Mom's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. You can't just leave, Sasha. What about Jessica? What about the baby? I took a breath, feeling my frustration bubble up. Mom, I've told you before, Jessica and the baby aren't my responsibility. How can you say that? She snapped, her voice shaking. She's your sister. That baby is your niece. I clenched my fists, the familiar anger rising in my chest. And whose fault is that? She's 32, Mom. She's not some helpless kid. Mom's lip trembled. She's struggling. She needs support. Support? I laughed bitterly. You mean she needs someone else to clean up her mess? Again. Dad leaned forward, his eyes stern. Watch your tone. I met his gaze, unflinching. I'm done, Dad. I'm done playing this game. You've always bailed her out, and she never learns. You can't keep expecting me to put my life on hold for her. A heavy silence settled over the room. Mom's shoulders sagged, and for a moment, I thought she might actually hear me. But then Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs, her face twisted in a smug smirk. Wow, Sasha, she drawled. Didn't know you were such a drama queen. I shot her a glare. This isn't about you, Jessica. She laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. Oh, it's always about me, isn't it? Poor Sasha, the victim. Always so put upon. My patience snapped. You think this is about me playing the victim? You've never taken responsibility for anything in your life, Jess. You just expect everyone else to clean up after you. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. And what's your problem? You're just jealous because Mom and Dad actually care about me. Jealous? I repeated, my voice rising. Of what? That you get babied and coddled while I have to work twice as hard for half the acknowledgement? Yeah, Jess. Real jealous. Sasha, enough, Dad said sharply. This is not how we talk to each other. I scoffed. Isn't it? Because this is how you've treated me my whole life. I'm only good enough when you need something from me. Mom wiped her eyes, her voice wavering. That's not true. We love you. Then why do you treat me like I'm disposable? I shot back. The second I say no, suddenly I'm the bad guy? I'm not here to be your backup plan for Jessica's mistakes. Jessica rolled her eyes and started scrolling through her phone, like the conversation bored her. That was the final straw. I grabbed my keys from the table. Where are you going? Mom asked, panic flickering in her eyes. Anywhere but here, I said, heading for the door. Don't walk out on your family, Sasha. Dad's voice was sharp, almost desperate, but I was done listening. I slammed the door behind me, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, my mind racing. This wasn't how I wanted it to go. I'd wanted to leave quietly, without drama. But Jessica always found a way to drag me into her chaos. I got into my car and started driving, no destination in mind. The streetlights blurred past as I sped through the familiar streets of my childhood, the weight of years of resentment pressing heavy on my chest. I pulled over at a park down the road, cutting the engine and leaning back in my seat. My hands were still shaking. I stared out at the empty playground, the swings swaying gently in the breeze. And then, out of nowhere, the memory hit me. I was 10, and Jessica was supposed to take me to this very park. I'd been so excited, my cool older sister, spending time with me. But when the time came, she bailed. Didn't even tell me why. I sat on the porch for hours, waiting, until Mom finally came out and told me Jessica had gone out with her friends instead. That was the first time I realized I wasn't a priority to her, that she didn't see me as a sister, but as a burden. I blinked, the bitterness of that memory mixing with the fresh hurt from tonight. It was always like this. Jessica taking what she wanted, leaving the mess behind for everyone else to deal with. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Hey, just checking in. Everything okay? I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to calm down. I typed back a quick response. Not really, but I'll be fine. Thanks for asking. I sat there for a while, the cold seeping into the car, the silence pressing in around me. Part of me wanted to go back, to fight more, to make them see how unfair this all was. But I knew it wouldn't make a difference. They'd never listen. Not as long as Jessica was there to manipulate them. I needed to move forward, for myself, even if it meant cutting ties completely. When I got home that evening, I could feel the tension before I even stepped inside. The air was heavy, like a storm was about to break. I opened the front door and found my parents waiting for me in the living room. Dad was gripping the letter like it was a personal attack. Mom sat next to him, her eyes red and puffy, a box of tissues clutched in her lap. Jessica was nowhere to be seen, which probably meant she was lurking nearby, listening in. I let out a silent breath, bracing myself. You wanted to talk? Dad waved the letter in the air. What is this? My notice, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm moving out at the end of the month. Mom made a choked sound, like I just told her I was leaving forever. You can't just leave. What about your family? What about Jessica? I swallowed back the frustration bubbling up inside me. I've done everything I can to help around here, but I can't keep living like this. Dad's face twisted. Like what? With a roof over your head and people who care about you? My patience snapped. No, Dad. Like I'm a live-in nanny you're trying to corner into raising Jessica's kid for free. I have my own life, my own job. I can't just drop everything because you think I'm lucky. Mom's lips trembled. We never asked you to do this full-time. We just want you to help out. Help out? I laughed bitterly. You were literally planning to use my rent as leverage to force me into babysitting. That's not helping out. That's manipulation. Dad's tone turned cold. You think you're above this family? Is that it? You're too good to help? I felt my face heat up. This isn't about being above anyone. It's about respect. I've worked my ass off my whole life while Jessica's been given everything. And now you expect me to drop everything to make her life easier. Jessica's going through a really hard time, Mom said, her voice cracking. She's struggling. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. So am I. And I refused to set myself on fire to keep her warm. Silence hung between us. Then Dad sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. If you're so determined to leave, fine. But don't expect us to come running when you fall flat on your face. The words stung, but I refused to let them see it. I won't. I turned and walked upstairs, my heart pounding in my ears. I knew this wasn't the end of it. They'd try again, guilt me, argue, maybe even pretend to be okay with it. But I had to hold my ground. I wasn't changing my mind. The next few days were a nightmare. Mom and Dad alternated between cold silence and passive-aggressive comments. Jessica avoided me completely, but I could feel her presence like a dark cloud hanging over the house. She started taking over more space, leaving her things everywhere, like she was marking her territory. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find her rummaging through the fridge. She pulled out a container of leftovers, my leftovers, and popped it into the microwave without a second glance. "Did you ask?" I said, struggling to keep my tone even. Jessica shot me a bored look. "What's your problem?" "My problem," I said, clenching my fists, "is that you keep taking my things without asking." She shrugged, crossing her arms. "God, Sasha, you're acting like I stole your car. It's just food." "It's not just food," I snapped. "It's about respect." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Whatever. You're leaving anyway, right? What do you care?" I took a deep breath, fighting back the urge to yell. "Exactly. I'm leaving. So stay out of my way until then." She smirked. "Trust me, I can't wait for you to be gone." I turned and walked away, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. The night before my move, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks and groans of the house I'd grown up in. Part of me felt a twinge of sadness, not for the house itself, but for the family I'd always wished we could be. When we were kids, Jessica and I used to build pillow forts in the living room. We'd stay up late whispering secrets and daring each other to sneak cookies from the kitchen. Back then, she was my hero. I wanted to be just like her. But that version of Jessica was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed. By morning, I was ready. Rachel showed up early with her car, and we started loading my stuff. I thought I'd timed it perfectly, early enough that Mom and Dad wouldn't be up, that Jessica wouldn't have a chance to make a scene. Of course, nothing in this house ever went according to plan. I was halfway down the stairs with a box when I heard Dad's footsteps behind me. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. I tightened my grip on the box and kept moving. "I told you. I'm leaving today." "You can't just sneak out like this," he snapped, following me outside. "We're a family, Sasha. Are you really going to abandon your own family?" I set the box down in Rachel's car and turned to face him. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm choosing to live my own life. There's a difference." Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with tears. "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I said firmly. "What about Jessica?" she sobbed. "What about the baby?" I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Mom, I can't keep sacrificing my life to fix her mistakes." Mom's tears spilled over, her breath hitching. "How can you be so heartless?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I'm not heartless. I'm tired." Dad's face twisted in anger. "Fine, go. But don't expect us to be there when you realize how badly you screwed up." I bit back the hurt and turned to Rachel. "Let's go." We finished loading my stuff in silence. My parents stood in the doorway, watching, their faces a mix of anger and sadness. Jessica peeked out from behind them, her expression smug and satisfied. By the time we pulled away from the house, I felt like I'd been holding my breath for years. And now, finally, I could breathe. The first few weeks in my new place felt unreal. For the first time in years, I came home to silence. No guilt trips. No passive-aggressive comments. No Jessica sprawling across the couch like a queen while I tiptoed around my own house. I didn't have to double-check the fridge to see if my food had mysteriously disappeared. I didn't have to listen to Mom sigh dramatically every time I walked into a room. I didn't have to exist under a roof where I was seen as nothing but convenient. Rachel was an amazing roommate. Chill, respectful, and, most importantly, not emotionally manipulative. For the first time in forever, I could just exist. And I won't lie, part of me expected my parents to let me go. Maybe they'd realize how unfair they had been. Maybe they'd actually start treating me like an independent adult instead of a resource. But of course, that wasn't what happened. The text started first. "Mom, Sasha, please. Let's talk. This is all a misunderstanding. Dad, you're acting childish. Come home so we can discuss this like adults. Mom, Jessica's really struggling. Don't punish her for past mistakes. The baby needs you." I ignored them all. Then came the calls. I blocked their numbers. Then the messages from extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, most of whom I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly had very strong opinions about what a horrible, selfish person I was. Aunt Carol, your poor mother cries every day over what you've done. Don't you feel anything? Cousin Emily, Jessica needs help. She's a single mother, for God's sake. You don't have to forgive her, but a baby shouldn't suffer because of your bitterness. And my personal favorite, Uncle Mike, family sticks together. You think your fancy new life makes you better than us? One day you'll realize how much you need us, and by then, it'll be too late. Too late for what, exactly? I blocked them all. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. One afternoon, I was eating lunch in the teacher's lounge when the school secretary poked her head in. Sasha, there's someone here asking for you. I looked up from my sandwich. Who? The secretary hesitated. Your mother. I felt my stomach drop. I stood, forcing a neutral expression onto my face. I'll handle it. As soon as I stepped into the front office, I saw her. Mom. She looked wrecked. Her hair was a mess, her eyes swollen from crying. And in her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket, was Jessica's baby. The sight knocked the breath out of me. Mom spotted me and gasped like she'd just been saved. Sasha. She rushed forward, adjusting the baby like some kind of emotional prop. Please, just listen. I didn't move. You can't be here. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't know what else to do. You won't answer our calls. You won't come home. Jessica is falling apart without you. I inhaled slowly, forcing my voice to stay even. Where is Jessica? Mom's face crumpled. She, her voice broke. She left. The words hung between us. I felt nothing. Not shock. Not sadness. Just confirmation of what I had known all along. Jessica was never going to step up. She was never going to take responsibility. She had done what she had always done, failed. And now, my parents were scrambling to fix it. You need to come home, Mom pleaded. We can't do this alone. We don't know how. I exhaled sharply. You should have thought of that before you tried to manipulate me into raising her kid for her. Mom flinched. Sasha, please. She's your niece. I swallowed the lump in my throat and glanced at the baby. She was so small, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the disaster she had been born into. A tiny part of me, the part that still had a heart, felt bad. But I wasn't the solution to this. I looked back at Mom, my voice steady. I'm not coming back. Her lip trembled. She needs family. I let out a bitter laugh. Funny how that only matters when it's convenient for you. Mom sniffled. I know we've made mistakes. I raised an eyebrow. Mistakes? She wiped her face, taking a shaky breath. We should have made Jessica take more responsibility. We should have been stricter with her. But it's too late now, and we're all she has. I shook my head. No, you're all she has. I don't owe her anything. She's a baby. Mom's voice cracked. An innocent baby, Sasha. How can you be so cold? I clenched my fists. I knew she wanted me to break, to cave. Instead, I stepped back. I have to get back to work. Mom let out a sob. Sasha, please. I turned and walked back inside. She didn't follow me. And that was the last time I saw my mother in person. The calls stopped. The texts slowed. For the first time in months, I had silence. I should have felt relief. And I did, in a way. But there was also something else, something I didn't want to name. Not guilt, not regret, more like finality. Because I knew what that silence meant. My parents had given up on me. Or maybe they'd finally realized I wasn't coming back. Either way, I wasn't their problem anymore. And as much as I had dreamed of this moment, of the freedom, the peace, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something too. But I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't my job to fix them. It never had been. A few months passed. Life moved on. I focused on work, on building a life that belonged to me. Rachel and I became good friends. Real friends, not just roommates. We had lazy movie nights, drank too much wine on Fridays, and turned our tiny apartment into a home. For the first time in forever, I wasn't constantly waiting for the next disaster. Then, one night, My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the message. Hey. That was it. Just hey. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. I didn't need to ask who it was. Jessica. I locked my phone and set it down. A minute later, it buzzed again. Mom told me you refused to help. Guess that means you win. Congrats. I let out a slow breath. There it was. Even after everything, Jessica still saw this as a game. A competition. Like I had spent my entire life working my ass off just to beat her. Like I had left to spite her, not because I had finally chosen myself. I closed my eyes, waiting to feel something. Anger? Sadness? But all I felt was tired. And done. I blocked her number. And that was the last time I ever heard from my sister. Through the family grapevine, I heard bits and pieces. Jessica never came back. My parents tried to hold things together, but raising a baby in their 60s was breaking them. They were exhausted, overwhelmed, drained in every possible way. They had spent years enabling Jessica, fixing her mistakes, covering for her. And now they were paying the price. At one point, they even tried to reach out again. A new number, a new message. Your niece deserves to know her aunt. I stared at those words for a long time. Because they were right. The baby. She was innocent in all of this. But that didn't change the fact that my parents had never wanted me as an aunt. They had wanted me as a solution. And I refused to spend the rest of my life cleaning up a mess I never made. I blocked the number. And I moved on. Looking back, I think the hardest thing wasn't leaving. It was realizing that I had spent so much of my life waiting. Waiting for them to change. Waiting for my parents to see me as more than an afterthought. Waiting for Jessica to grow up. Waiting for things to finally be fair. But they never were. And they never would be. So I stopped waiting. And I built a life where I didn't have to.